Welcome to the reading of the Spirits book. We are reading the introduction. We're now on part 7. So in the last video we talked about part 6, where Kardec gives us an introduction or a summary of what is Spiritism. One of the things that we talked about is morality, the moral sense, that the good spirits teach us to be good. They inspires us to be good. As we are beings in evolution, morality is one of the things that we want to develop. Now, Kardec follows the precepts of Jesus, and there's one book, so there were books that derived out of the Spirits book, and one of them treats specifically on morality, and it's called The Gospel According to Spiritism. And in the beginning of the book, Kardec says, look, there are many aspects of Jesus that one can look at. You can look at his life as a man. You can look at the prophecies. You can look at the precepts that became the foundation of the church. You can look into a multitude of things. If all of those things have caused a lot of controversy, there's one thing that everybody agrees with, is the virtues. Right? Be good, help others, and his morality. So he removes all else and he only talks about morality based on the teachings of Jesus. And you see that coming back. So we just wanted to explain that as now we go into part 7 of the introduction. And here Kardec talks about science. So he says, for many people, opposition from the institution of higher learning represents, if not actual evidence, at least a strong argument challenging the philosophy. We're not among those who would clamor against those scholars, lest we be regarded the disrespectful of their erudition. On the contrary, we hold them in a great esteem and would be greatly honored to be numbered among them. Their opinion, however, does not represent an irrefutable judgment by any means. So there are those that disregard Spiritism, and he is going to talk about that. He says later here that the physical sciences are based on the properties of matter, which can be subjected to experimentation and manipulated at will. Spirit phenomena, on the other hand, rest on the action of intelligences who have wills of their own and who show us at every turn that they are not subject to our will. Spirit manifestations consequently cannot be dealt with in the same way as physical matter. They require special conditions and a different approach, and trying to subject them to ordinary investigative procedures would be trying to establish analogies that do not exist. Submitting the issue to science would be like handling the solution of the problem to the existence of the soul to a group of physicians and astronomers. In fact, Spiritism rests entirely on the existence of the soul and its state after death. It would be highly logical to think that that particular person must be a great psychologist simply because he or she is a great mathematician or an anatomist. For example, an anatomist dissects a human body in search of the soul, but does not find it under the scalpel as he would have found a nerve or a mist. So he's just explaining here why anything that's material, by definition, will not be able to study that which comes from the spirit. Then later on he says, meanwhile, those who take the negative stance without a prior in-depth study of the issue, and who ridicule those who do not agree with their opinion, forget that the same has happened regarding the majority of the great discoveries that have honored humankind. So he just explains that this is something different. It still can be studied, but not under the same methodology and under the same scope of a particular material science. So not anatomy, not as astronomy, but as the science of the spirit. And then he says, look, there will always be those who are not willing to look at it in depth and still be skeptical about it. And let's remember that it happened other times. He says here, there's a list of illustrious deniers of new ideas and inscribed alongside of the names of the erudite assembly, which in 1752 laughed at Franklin's paper on lightning rods, considering it unworthy of mention. And then he also talks about it was a group of names that caused France to lose its advantage in steam-powered navigation by declaring Fulton's theory an impracticable dream. Nevertheless, both issues were in scope of science. So he talks about there's the fact that science will always evolve and will always learn new things, and will always be those that at first glance don't accept something. But what he talks about here is that he is the one who's willing to study, and there are people that were willing to study, not in a scientific methodology, but not under the material science. And then he goes on to say, because it doesn't fit with any scope of science, then but he still was going to use a methodology for it. And he addresses those who are not willing, and he addresses those who consider themselves to know it all. And also he talks about the target, or for those to whom this book is targeted. He said, those who consider their reason to be infallible are very close to error. Even those whose ideas are highly erroneous are supported by their reasoning, and that is why they reject everything that appears impossible to them. Those who yesterday rejected the admirable discoveries that humanity is proud of today also follow their own judgment in doing so. What we call reason is almost always masked pride, and those who believe they're infallible place themselves in par with God. It's the opposite of the humility that he mentioned before. It's just, I know it all, so what is there to learn? Therefore, we will focus, and here's he's talking about who is this book targeted to. We will focus on those who are reasonable enough to suspend judgment regarding matters that they have not yet witnessed, and judging the future in the light of the past, do not believe that humankind has yet reached its peak, or that nature has turned the last page of its book. So he is here introducing there is a study, a reasoning, a logic, a method, but those who are open-minded and willing to go through the study process. Moving on, he is on chapter or part 8 of the introduction. He is going to talk about the study methodology. So he introduced Spiritism as a science, a different science that we know, but nonetheless some that can be used as with a methodology, with a study, with the discipline of a science. And of course, it will not be if you flip a switch multiple times, it will always have the same response. When you're dealing with spirits and they have their will, you'll be subject to their will. So it's not as dealing with matter. So let's see what he talks about study now. We would like to add the study of Spiritism, which suddenly unveils such new and grand revelations, can only be profitably pursued by serious, persevering, and open-minded individuals animated by a firm and sincere desire to arrive at a result. And see that the word here is study. It's not something that you just look at it and then you're done. It's a continuous study. And he characterizes that study by these qualities of being serious, persevering, open-minded individuals, animated by a firm and sincere desire to arrive at a result. Then later on in this part, he talks about continuity, regularity, and concentration of thought. It's very common that in Spiritism you'll find study groups. These are groups of people that will get together and continuously study those books. So there are other books that have been written, later on. Francisco Cândido Xavier or Chico Xavier as a medium is very renowned, would wrote multiple books. A lot of the studies of Spiritism are based on Kardec's books. And you notice that you finish a book and then you start again, and we keep doing it over and over because it is the method, it is the form, it is the dialogue, it is the reasoning that Kardec is trying to inspire here, instill in all of us. Whoever wishes to acquire knowledge about a particular science must study it methodically. And it's interesting that he's calling Spiritism a science. He said it could not be a material science, but nonetheless is a science. So whoever is interested in studying a science must do so methodically, starting at the very beginning and following the chain and development of its ideas. So he wants to walk people through what he discovered. That's why he put this methodology together. It is in the form of questions and answers to trigger reasoning, dialogue, and study. And he talks again about continuity being what characterizes a serious study. So there's never such thing as being complete, finished with Spiritism. It's something that is forever and ever going. Then he says here in the bottom, we have stated that this high order spirits only take part in serious meetings, especially those characterized by perfect communion of thought and moral sentiment. Frivolousness and idle curiosity repel them just as they would repel any reasonable individual. And it's important for two parts, because we want to study, and if we agree and if we understand the vibration and how we can connect to others and the laws of attraction, we will be, if we're serious, committed, really trying to find the answers, this is the kind of spirits we'll attract around us, or the influences that we'll have. Then he explains here about the questioning, right? The thought process that we should use in studying. Be most diligent and persevering in your studies. Otherwise, the high order spirits will abandon you, as the professor would abandon negligent students. So this completes the reading of part 8 of the introduction. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.